Dr. Dave Pennington from Penn Coaching and Consulting, and one of the things I do with potential prospects or clients is I provide an assessment where they can actually understand the value of their company. That's really important because a lot of times as a business owner, you don't really know what your company's worth. It's interesting that the actual assessment is based upon 8 metrics. And today I just want to look at one of those metrics, which I think is really important when you think about just understanding your company and what you need to work on to improve its value, profitability, that kind of thing. And the one I want to look at today is called financial performance. Now, it ought to be obvious, I think, but when we think of financial performance, we're thinking of several different areas. To begin with, actually your total income. Now, that's kind of where we tend to focus. Hey, our company made X amount of thousands of dollars last year, and you focus on that. But as we all know, you have expenses. And sometimes what happens is we're so focused upon the income that we're making, and that's kind of our benchmark for whether we're being successful or not, that we're not thinking about the expenses. And the expenses are pretty important because ultimately, if you don't hold your expenses down and you're not careful about your expenses, it affects your bottom line or your profitability. So when someone tells me, hey, last year we made X amount of dollars, I say, well, that's interesting. I said, well, let me ask you this. What kind of percentage are you making on your bottom line profit? And often they don't even know, because they've never really looked at the numbers. They're just so focused upon the income, they're not thinking about the expenses, and therefore they don't really know fully what their profit is as a business. Now, they will take a salary out of that, they'll pay other people out of that, but your business ought to be making money in addition to you personally making money. And that's so important. So I would challenge you as you think about your company, don't just look at your top of line revenue, but make sure you look at your expenses, and you always want to be thinking about ways that you can reduce the expenses you have. How can you cut out cost? What happens sometimes, we subscribe to things and we add this and we add that, and we don't really watch all the expenses of what's coming through, and we're actually kind of throwing money away. I know I've certainly done that. And periodically you have to go back and kind of look, okay, what am I really paying for here? And do I really need it anymore? Maybe I needed it months ago or years ago, but I don't need it now, and so I'm just continuing to pay for a subscription or some sort of support in some way that really isn't helping me, and it's actually just wasting money. And then a good thing to do as you aim for profitability is a lot of times what happens is business owners, they have a top of line, they have their expenses, and then whatever's left over is their profit. A much better way to do it is instead of just being left with whatever's is remaining, it's better for you to determine, okay, what kind of profit do you want your business to have? Do you want it to be a 20% profit or a 30% profit or a 40% profit? If you can take your profit out early, what happens is then it forces you to live within means. So there are companies, for example, they talk about profit first. That's a great idea. Because if you have income coming in and you take your profit out first, then what happens is whatever's left over, that becomes really what you can spend. You can't spend any more than what's left over. But most companies don't do it that way. Most companies have income, they have expenses, and whatever's left over, that becomes their profit. And it's much more inefficient to do it that way. And you actually will find out you're not really careful about your expenses because you're not really trying to make sure you have a certain percentage of profit. So when we think about financial performance, those are the kind of things that buyers are looking for. They want to know your top of line. They want to know what your expenses are. They want to know what your profitability is. Now, in addition to that, another thing that you want to be thinking about with financial performance is you actually want to be thinking a little bit about just making sure your books are in order. A lot of small business owners, they keep their own books. Now, they may have a bookkeeper who posts things and does payables and receivables and that kind of thing. But as far as setting up an accounting structure and making sure things are being allocated properly, quite often, if we're honest, we're a little sloppy about that. Now that's okay if you're running it yourself and you're not really too concerned, but when you get ready where you're looking at possibly selling your business, I assure you that buyer, he's going to look at your balance statement, he's going to look at your P&L, your profit and loss statement. He's going to dig into those numbers because he really wants to know where the money's going and what are you spending it on and what your true profitability is. And a lot of business owners, in addition to that, they actually have a lot of perks. You know, it may be a car, it may be some travel, it may be a bunch of other things, and those are all kinds of things that kind of put in they're in business expenses. Sometimes we can get a little sloppy with that as well. So having a good set of books. Now, one thing you can do if you don't really have the expertise within your company is you can actually hire an accountant who will go through your books, kind of an outside consultant kind of accountant who will go through your books. He'll help you evaluate whether you have the proper accounting structure there. He'll also help make sure that you're allocating things properly. He very likely will find some things that you can clean up that will give you a better set of books so that you have a better understanding of where you are financially. And you're positioning yourself so that one day when you get ready to sell, you have a good set of books that people can look at. They make sense and they're really done very, very well. And that gives the buyer a sense of assurance that what he's buying is something that really is in order. You've taken the time to do it. And yeah, it'll cost you a little bit, but it's well worth it. And it kind of becomes an outside objective opinion, and you can even have them write up, you know, what they've done and their sort of their evaluation of your books. And it gives you a much more professional approach so that one day when you get ready to sell, you really have your ducks lined up. You have your books in order. Now, all of these things are tied to your financial performance. You know, think about it. When someone buys your company, they're not buying your company just because they like you or they like what you're doing. They're really trying to buy something that's going to make them money. And all of these things become super important because if you can demonstrate, particularly with your financials, that things are in order, it's just going to make you a much more viable company. And it's going to give you a sense of confidence that you're running things well and that you're managing things well. So think about your company. How much effort and energy do you really put into making sure you have your financial performance ducks lined up? So often we're a little sloppy, you know, we're comfortable. We don't really have to be that tight or that concerned because we're the only ones that are going to see the books. Nobody else really cares. It affects our bottom line, but we really want to run it like a business. We really want to run it efficiently, effectively, cost effectively, so that our profitability is high and so that our books are in order and things are really, really done well. That'll give you confidence as an owner. It actually will position your value to be higher, and it will make you much more attractive one day when someone wants to buy your business because you've really already taken the time to do it right. Once you get it right, it's a lot easier to keep it right. But sometimes it's challenging on the front end because we just never have taken the time to get things in order the way that we need to. So a key metric in really having a good business, one that has high value and one that also someone will want to buy, is financial performance. So ask yourself, hey, is that something that I need a little help with? If so, I'd be glad to chat with you a little bit about that. You can reach me at dave@penncoaching.com. We can talk a little bit about it, give you some guidance, and we can look at some of the other metrics. There are actually 8 of them that will help you have a really good business that is highly valued and very sellable one day. dave@penncoaching.com. Reach out to me.